Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Water fluoridation is the controlled addition of the chemical compound fluoride to a public water supply, ostensibly to reduce tooth decay. But is it effective? And is it safe? On this episode of The Conspiracy Show, we'll examine the water fluoridation controversy. When I approached a number of critics of water fluoridation, they were a little nervous about coming on the show, quite frankly. About what? Well, the name of this program is The Conspiracy Show, and the word conspiracy, when placed next to fluoride, can be problematic. You see, critics of water fluoridation see fluoride as a serious public health issue, and they're tired of being portrayed as a bunch of tinfoil hat-wearing loons. Too often, they're ignored or taunted by someone shouting them down, and then repeating lines from the movie Dr. Strangelove. Remember the Sterling Hayden character, General Jack Ripper, who denounces fluoride as a communist plot? I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all our precious bodily fluids. Well, you've seen the movie. Well, we're not going to do that on this show. I believe water fluoridation is a serious health issue, and all the evidence, both pro and con, deserves a fair hearing. You're about to meet a chemistry professor, as well as a medical investigative reporter and an anti-fluoride crusader from San Diego, who will cite numerous human and animal studies that they say demonstrate considerable evidence of direct toxic effects of fluoride on the brain. And we'll hear from a supporter of water fluoridation who maintains it's safe, it's effective, and all this criticism and concern is fueled by bad science. Me? I'm just like you. I want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. It is time to redefine reality.
Fluorides are basically toxic material. They're toxic compounds. Some are waste products of the phosphate fertilizer industry, for example, which is where most of the fluoridated water, overwhelmingly in the United States, comes from, that waste product. And it was a byproduct in the form of a released gas during the development of the atomic bomb in research in southern New Jersey by DuPont. It was once a waste product of the manufacture of aluminum by Alcoa. When Alcoa had this problem, they decided to deflect it. They said, what can we say that will get people to look the other way? And so they commissioned a study.
In fact, the first suggestion to put fluoride in the drinking water was made by Gerald Cox, an industrial chemist working at the Mellon Institute. And the suggestion to him to look into the possibility that fluoride might help with tooth decay came from the aluminum industry itself. Fluoride is a compound. The element is fluorine. When it combines with something else, then we call that compound fluoride. Fluoride, from a chemical perspective, is pretty benign, but it's extremely active biologically, and that's where the problem is here.
It was bamboozled into an industry of concern and care for tooth decay. It was railroaded in because of other interests to begin with.
The aluminum industry, the phosphate fertilizer industry, steel industry, oil industry, brick industry, ceramic industry, you name it. There's so many industries putting out fluoride pollution, including the nuclear industry, including the Manhattan Project with the atomic bomb.
And when they had the problem with the release of huge amounts of toxic compounds in the atomic bomb research, that's when it got serious in the 1940s. Gas was released in southern New Jersey. It wasn't intentional, but it destroyed crops of farmers. I mean, it was obvious, this is toxic stuff we're playing with here, and the farmers went to court.
And they were scared stiff of the lawsuits. And the argument goes that if fluoride became safe enough to put in your drinking water, then it would undermine any lawsuits that fluoride was a problem.
Alcoa commissioned a study of 28 cities in the United States where there were already natural levels of fluoride. And they hired a researcher to go out there, and he did, and he discovered, with much trumpeting, that in the communities where there were higher levels of fluoride, there was better dental health. Voila.
So it was, wow, there was some study somewhere that a little bit of fluoride seemed to harden teeth and prevent caries in animals. No scientific studies done, and all of a sudden it was being dumped into municipal waterways. It was a waste product and still is.
What they failed to mention at the time was that this researcher researched more than 28 cities. And rather than include all of his research, he cherry-picked it so that the result of the study made it seem as if high levels of fluoride, good dental health. Not true.
Fluoride poisons the lungs. It severely damages the lymphatic system to such a degree that you can't mount a good immune response. It has a toxic effect on the bones, and there's such a thing as fluorosis of the teeth. It ultimately makes the bones brittle, and it poisons the bone marrow. The Nazi German government found, and so did the Russian government, that if they could fluoridate the water, that it created a more docile human, less resistant, less likely to rise up against the regime.
So many negative results have come out of those studies that there has been major manipulation to hide the results of these fluoride studies.
When was the decision made to add fluoride to drinking water?
The idea of putting it into the water was first publicly recommended by an industrial chemist.
That's not the case. The first major study was done in 1950, not before. So that's just not true. This is so typical of conspiracy theorists. They just lie. I'm sorry. They just make things up. Now, okay, part of the problem is that conspiracy theorists seemingly can find studies that seemingly show some particular claim. They're misreading the study, they're misinterpreting the study, or they take some statement out of the study that says, it's possible this could happen, further research is needed, as definitive proof that it's happening. I'm just telling you, as an experienced conspiracy skeptic, this is inevitably what happens when you actually look at the primary document. You read the actual study, you go, oh, that isn't what it says.
But some of those studies are very strong. The consistency is very important. So the evidence of that swallowing fluoride actually reduces tooth decay is extremely weak, and it gets weaker by the year. They quibble with the methodology. Incidentally, if they took the same quibbles with this methodology, these methodologies, and applied them to their studies which supposedly support the benefits of fluoridation, you'd have to chuck all those studies out. And the only way they can handle this is to deny the validity, not of just one study, but all 26 studies. They're saying they're all junk science.
From the very beginning, they've always talked about the public policy of fluoridation. And almost everybody who follows this issue at all will realize that the public policy of fluoridation, they say, is safe and effective. Fluorine is the element, and the element itself is one of the halogen group. But a lot of people don't realize the halogen group is made up of elements that we all know. And they're fluorine and chlorine and bromine and iodine, 4 out of the 5. All of them kill things. That's what they're great at.
The best collective studies, the meta-analysis of all other studies done by the CDC and the National Institutes of Health showed that communities that have fluoridated water have much better, statistically significant better lower rates of tooth decay than those that don't. It works.
What I would say is that this has nothing to do with children's teeth.
There are a number of scientific studies showing that fluoride is a very potent carcinogen. It causes, for sure, bone cancer. It can cause lymphatic cancer, and it shuts down the thyroid, and when you do that, that allows breast cancer and ovarian cancer to develop.
No evidence of that at all. There's the CDC and the National Institutes of Health and the Institute for Science-Based Medicine have all looked into those claims, and nobody finds any credible evidence at all.
It turns out to protect the whole population, a child could not drink more than 1 or 2 glasses of fluoridated tap water. In other words, fluoridation is unthinkable, unconscionable. And what parent in their right mind would put the benefit to their child's teeth above their child's brains?
Fluoride is an aggressive enzyme poison. It binds to protein, it binds to the enzymes, it binds to the brain, and it doesn't let go easy.
These people also took an oath, and we believe that they should be taking an oath to, protect the citizens. But if you go straight in and you're asking people to tell everybody that fluoride's bad, and now our whole city's been selling it's good the whole time, you're forgetting where you are.
So many negative results have come out of those studies that there has been major manipulation to hide the results of these fluoride studies. Phyllis Mullenix, a researcher at Harvard with a great reputation among colleagues, was tasked with testing out fluorides on rats for neurotoxicity. Lo and behold, the results showed remarkable neurotoxicity in rats. This is exactly the kind of research that the medical establishment jumps on all the time. Animal studies. They're the ones who promote animal studies as being, the gold standard of when you know something about human health. She had her study, there it was. She was told by her superiors she could not publish the study.
Researchers at the US Public Health Service were looking into the issue of dental fluorosis. And they were looking for a level of fluoride which wouldn't cause too much dental fluorosis, which is a mottling, discoloration of the tooth enamel, at the same time reducing tooth decay, they thought.
In fact, the whole thing was discovered with yellow teeth, Texas teeth, with levels that were about 6 times higher than the recommended one, just by natural fluoridation. Since it was reduced, those rates have gone down. There may be effects of yellowing of teeth for some other reason. In any case, the scientists that have studied that overall conclude that that's not the case.
Marcus, an EPA toxologist, discovered toxicological effects of fluorides. He was told that this was not a good idea, so to speak. In fact, his findings were actually changed by the EPA, for whom he was working, to show that fluorides were completely safe, when he had found in the study that they were dangerous.
But I will tell you, fluoride is such a diabolical poison. I've had children who were fine who accidentally swallowed a fluoride rinse, a large one, and have developed diseases, tumors of the lymphatic system, and patients who have had diabetes, juvenile diabetes, that I've traced to the fluoride. It's extremely toxic. It's a rodenticide, in other words, it kills rats. It's the active ingredient of Prozac, knock them out good and make them go crazy stuff. It's an insecticide component to beat the ban. Absolutely has to be banned.
We're talking about bone damage, cancer, osteosarcoma rates increasing in young boys. We're talking about genetic damage. We're talking about infertility. We're talking about pregnant mothers giving birth to mentally handicapped children. We're talking about lowered IQ. All of these neurotoxicity, all of these elements have turned up in studies of fluorides.
They're not doing the studies themselves. They're not saying, we've done IQ studies and we found no effect at 1 part per million. They're not doing the studies on IQ. They're not doing studies on thyroid function. We know that fluoride accumulates in the pineal.
No evidence of that at all. There's the CDC and the National Institutes of Health and the Institute for Science-Based Medicine have all looked into those claims, and nobody finds any credible evidence at all. If this were really the case, do you think the CDC and the National Institutes of Health would have no idea that this is happening? It's misleading to say the government's fluoridating our water. And actually, in many cases, they're unfluoridating it. They're lowering the levels of fluoridation. It's there's a Goldilocks level there that seems to work the best.
Even if you're out presenting this information to a city council person or, a water board or someone else who has a legislative power to do something about it, that when you present that information, quite likely what you'll get is a thank you for sharing. That they are relying upon what they would consider to be either experts or, people that they rely on for other things in their life. So they would rely on a Department of Health, or they would rely upon the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. And I would say to you that the health departments are run from the top down, not the bottom up. In fact, what happens is they're given, a track to run on. They're told what to do from the top down always. Every health department is told that they will support the public policy of water fluoridation. And so when you start looking at how much power that actually has, because you're talking about in every county in the entire United States is taking this position, going straight to your city council and telling people that it causes hip fractures and it causes, basically lesions in the brain, or it does this particular thing or that particular thing. And now you need to go admit that for the last 60 years we've been harming people. How many of those people are going to raise their hand and say, okay, why don't we just go ahead and take this liability on from this point forward? If you go straight in and you're asking people to tell everybody that fluoride's bad and now our whole city's been selling it's good the whole time, you're forgetting where you are. And that's why I've said before, we have to find ways for those same council people that once before have said all along that fluoridation's great. We have to allow them to be in that space and quit putting the crap in the water.
China seems to protect its people, or India, or Russia even, or Japan. We don't have GMOs labeled. We don't have bans across the nation on fluoride, as we should.
How does one recover from exposure to fluoride over the course of decades?
Everybody wants to know what to do because we're all exposed to fluoride. How can we get rid of it? How can we recover from it? It's really tough.
It's water. Don't drink it. Drink bottled water if you don't want to drink it. I mean, this is like, I don't want electricity. I don't want running water. I don't want toilets. I don't want, these are social things we do because it improves life. If there wasn't evidence for it, we wouldn't do it.
One of the most effective pesticides that we have is sodium aluminum fluoride, which is called cryolite. And cryolite is put on things like head lettuce, romaine lettuce, all of your produce. Grapes is one of the big ones that I think that most people should worry about, because in white grape juice is being used more and more. So you go look and you think you're doing better because you're not drinking one of the other things, and you turn around in the back and it says the very strongest thing in there is white grape juice. You're getting a ton of fluoride in this. Sodas, it's actually in the syrup. Anything that's processed, chicken strips, fish sticks, all of these sliced things that we end up getting in packaging. Shredded wheat at 9.4 parts per million. And we're talking about 10 times as much as what we're worried about being put in the water. And most of us don't have the faintest idea that it was there in the first place.
I don't know of any countries that are intentionally running it at a higher level than they should be.
It is interesting to look at what other civilizations do and how China seems to protect its people, or India, or Russia even, or Japan. We're the last to get everything in Canada and the United States and America. We don't have GMOs labeled. We don't have bans across the nation on fluoride, as we should. We don't have the protections that we must rise up and achieve.
And most of Western Europe realizes this because they banned fluorides from water. Communities everywhere, I counted a dozen in the last year in the United States, have banned fluorides.
Quite a number in Canada stopped fluoridation, and many more in the United States stopped fluoridation. In all, 3.5 million people have stopped being fluoridated, liberated from fluoridation.
In 1975, the city of Los Angeles had a vote. And they voted against fluoridation, I think it was 213,168, so it was a fairly large margin. And for 20 more years, there was no new initiation of fluoridation. And then the dental societies bragged about how they were able to get this through the back door so that the general public and even those people who had an interest in the issue couldn't respond rapidly enough. And so they They shoved it through.
If it were the case that fluoridation or anything was harmful to too many people, then it wouldn't be happening. This is the whole point of having a democracy. So the idea that a handful of government agents could, for half a century, through administration after administration, through congressional hearings and so forth, through study after study by government agencies, could pull this off is just absurd.
We have the science on our side on this. We have the science which demonstrates that swallowing fluoride is not effective. And we have the science which indicates there are definitely dangers from swallowing fluoride and not an adequate margin of safety from known health effects. So the science is on our side.
Now, not to pile on, but I'd like to add a few more studies I've uncovered while working on this show. The largest dental survey ever conducted in the United States by the National Institute of Dental Research in 1986 and 87 found no difference in decayed, missing, and filled teeth, and a minimal difference in decayed, missing, and filled surfaces among children who had lived their entire lives in a fluoridated or unfluoridated community. Since 2000, 4 studies have reported that tooth decay does not increase, but continues to decrease after water fluoridation is stopped. We've posted links to all these studies on our website. So, at the risk of being accused of being part of an international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of your precious bodily fluids, I wish you Godspeed in organizing and petitioning your community to turn off the taps and end water fluoridation, if that is what you wish for. And now, I'd like to know what you have to say. Get in touch by email. You can contact me through the website, theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.